The issue is the guy's brother was a member of the mafia, so they give the eulogy. They say, well, wasn't as bad as his brother.
That was the eulogy. I love it. You know, when somebody mentioned to me that he was a guest of honor at a dinner, and they were talking about him. Then he got up to speak. He says, "I'm very confused." He says, "I thought I was the guest of honor. I have no idea who that guy was you were talking
about." Learning sponsors. Okay, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanach Zundel. Okay. Then friends of Melaskotsky, Moshe Zeligman Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, friends of Herb Jeremiah, Tzvi Ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Cohen, and those who were inspired by Rebbitzin Emeritus Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka Bas Meshulam Yisachar. A month of learning by the friends and students of Rabbi Shalom Kornblum, Harav Shalom Ben Mordechai, Susan and Ronald Podolsky, in memory of her father, Simcha Bunam Ben Yeshua, Michael and Judith Poretsky, in memory of his mother, Rachel Bas Avram. Again, Susan and Ronald Podolsky, in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Dov, B. Pizer, in memory of her father, Yitzchak Dov Ben Shmuel. We have a week of learning by Jack Gilman, in memory of his brother, Zev Yosef Ben Yitzchak, by Sharon and Michael Glass, in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Baruch, by Isaac and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his father, Isser Ben Shmuel David. Okay, we do not have any individual days of learning today. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So. Okay. High finance, gentlemen. Okay. All right. So I want to figure out with us today. Lamed Daled is the Amud for today, right?
Seems right.
However, okay.
You can do something else?
No. Okay, we were dealing with the story of the crossing of the Jordan. Okay, and okay, and we saw that at the end of the previous Amud, okay, Rabbi Yossi indicated that there were 3 occasions when the Kohanim, as opposed to the Levi'im, carried the Aron. Okay, so we're going to just quickly go back over that and then go quickly into the other. Okay, so on the very bottom, Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, just quickly to help me, make the transition back into the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi Omer, he says, B'shlosha mekomot nasu kohanim et ha'aron. 3 places the kohanim carried the Aron. Okay, number 1, Kashe Avru et HaYarden, as we're reading and learning now in the text, okay, from Yehoshua. All right. Number 2, the second example, Kashe Hisibu et Yericho. Okay, and when they went around, once they were in the land and went around to conquer Yericho, Jericho. And the third, Kashe Hachaziruhu Limkomo, when the time of Shlomo, when they brought it into the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, now we come back as we now start today's Daf Lamed Daled on the top of the Amud. Okay, what actually happened there at the Jordan? Okay, we're done for the moment discussing geography. Okay, with the proximity of Har Grizim and Har Eval to the Yarden itself, and we're going to talk about this episode of the crossing. Okay, as we go into this, I want us to understand that there's a discussion here about the miraculous nature of how the water was stopped. Okay, it's going to be a machloket, okay, in this topic. We're going to look at it briefly, but I want us to understand that both views, okay, in this machloket are not arguing on the miraculous nature of the event, as they are arguing what I'll call about the height of,
Well, really about the manner in which they crossed.
okay, the height of the water, and also in regards to the height of the water, whether they crossed in say, I don't want to say it so much single file, okay,
Or formation.
okay, or in the same formation that they were in terms of the way they camped. Okay, so that's I think enough of an introduction to help us now move into the Gemara and follow the machloket and the whole procedure. Okay. All right. So we're on the top of Lamed Dal. Okay. Amud Aleph Kevan Shenit Balu Raglei Kohanim B'Mayim. Once we have a situation that the feet of the Kohanim were in the water. Remember, we said that they were leading the Aron first. They were at the head. Okay. So they are the first ones to enter the water. That's going to now start the miracle of how the water was divided. Okay, in that case, right? Well, yeah.
And the web was
Well,
downstream, kept going.
you got this, and then you got this over here. So you had to have dry land in between. Okay. All right. So what happens? Chazru hamayim la'achreihem. Okay. The text here says that the waters returned backwards. It's not exactly that they returned backwards, we're going to see. Okay, the downstream continued to flow. Okay, but what was coming from upstream suddenly rose like a wall. Okay, all right, so that's our sense. Shenema, right? Okay, I've got a poor written text here. Nevo nos Haaron ad hayarden v'gomer. V'yamdu hamayim hayordim milamala kamu neid echad. Okay, so they're describing the situation. The waters came down from above and stood and rose up like a heap. Okay, almost like a curtain. Okay, a pillar. I was going to say a curtain, pillar, things like that. Okay, how high did they go? Says the Gemara. The Gemara asks, "Bekama gavoyin shalmayim." Shneim asar mil al shneim asar mil. It was right. So the indication was it was basically the 12 mil by 12 mil. Okay, which is the dimension of the Israelite camp. Okay, so in other words, that answer seems to imply that the person who presented that view was of the opinion that they crossed in formation, okay, and not information, but in formation. Okay, Bob.
How long is a mill?
Okay.
A mill is the same as a kilometer.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's about 6/10 of a mile.
Okay. All right. So that is why we're suggesting that whoever presented this height implied that they transferred the way they had been encamped, so it was the way they crossed. Okay.
That's actually
Well, looking at the Jordan River today, it would seem almost impossible.
Okay.
And
Anyway.
remember when it was, no
Okay.
matter which way they crossed.
Yeah.
It was a huge number of people, 3
Right,
million
3 million
people.
Right. Okay.
So no matter how shallow the river is, to get 3 million
People across is going to take some
you're gonna have
time.
a huge amount of water.
There was the military parade, they marched in battalions.
Yeah, but you have
That's
little
just it.
kids and
Sure.
women carrying
Yeah,
babies.
yeah.
It's not
Okay.
gonna go so.
Right. So that
Cattle.
Right, so that question is going to be an underlying theme here, because we saw earlier in the Gemara, okay, a reference in effect is which is faster, running
Well, that's
water.
gonna be here.
Oh, it's here, okay,
It's about
oops.
quarter of the way.
Okay, so which is faster, running water or
Running
moving people? Okay, All right. So now, so who was it that presented that view? Okay, it was Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so that was his view, that they crossed a information and that the height of the pillar of the
Well, we don't
water.
know the formation.
Okay,
We only know
right.
the height.
Okay. Now, Amarlo Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon, Lidvarecha, according to your view, Adam Kal or Mayim Kalim. Is a person faster or is the water flowing faster? Have Omer, Mayim Kalim. But normally we would say that water goes faster. Imkain, if that's the case, Ba'im Mayim Vishot Finotan. The water would come and drown them. Okay, Ella rather. Okay, so now we're going to get Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon's view. Okay, that's why I said we've got this.
In other words, once it was 3 mil high, now flow.
Okay, so that's the
over
point.
and
Okay, Elam Shayumayim Nigdashin Va'olin Kifin Al Gabe Kifin. No, so what would happen, he's saying, is that the water would come, flow down, and it would be wave after wave, right? Yeter Mishalosh Meot Mil. And when it reached, if you say it's only, I'm going to put it only in there, 3 mil high. Okay, what Yeter Mishalosh Meot Mil. Once it reached that, it would overflow it and drown. Ad Shera'u Otan Kol Malchei Mizrach Ma'arav. He's saying no, it had to be much higher than simply 3 mil, more than 300 mil is what it had to be. Okay, it was so high, this pillar of water, that it could be seen from some distance. Okay, and who could see it?
Notice it to the clouds.
Right? Ad Shera'u Otan Kol Malchei Mizrach U'Marav. Until kings, okay, in the east and in the west would be able to see this pillar of water. Okay, it's like a skyscraper, if you want to give an example. Shenemar, why? Because it says, Vahi Kishmoa Kol Malchei Ha'emori, Asher Be'ever Hayadain Yama. Okay, that it was that all those kings who from the Amorites area, right on the other side of the Jordan, okay, and they could see it westward. The Chol Malchei HaKnani, and all the kings in the Canaanite areas, Asher Al Hayam, that were all the way up by the Mediterranean, okay, in other words, the opposite direction, okay, what happens? All right, Al Hayam, Asher Hovish Hashem et Mei Yadein, Mipnei Bnei Yisrael, Ad Avram, V'yimam levavam, okay, and it says there in the pasuk, etc. They saw this and their hearts were afraid, trembling. Levavam v'lo haya bahem od ruach mipnei bnei Yisrael, and they had no spirit. In other words, not willing to attack or fight bnei Yisrael. Not only that, says the Gemara, but we'll give you extra proof. Okay, namely, va'af rachav hazona. Amra l'shluchei Yehoshua, and even Rachav, the lady of the evening. Okay,
could be that it means in that context.
We'll get to it. I know. Okay, well, we'll call her. She ran the inn at night too. Okay, okay. So what happens?
Madame.
Okay, so what happens? Okay. She even said to the messengers, okay, of Joshua, the spies, right? Ki shamanu et asher hovish Hashem et me yam suf v'gomer. We even heard what happened back when they left Egypt, okay? And the impression that Hashem did back then, okay, made us so nervous that in addition to what we hear now with what's happening with the Jordan. Okay, I believe it's Art Scroll that also makes an interesting side note at one point that there was, however, a difference between splitting of the Yam Suf and the splitting of the Jordan, because in the splitting of Yam Suf, you had 2 walls of water, whereas in the splitting of the Yarden, it was just a single wall or a single pillar. Okay. But that was Art Scroll's spin on. Okay, uktiv, right? So what happens? Am I right? Yeah. Okay, uktiv v'nishma, right? We read that. Odam biyadein amar lehem Yeshua. De'u ama atem ovrim et hayarden al manat shetorisheu et yoshvei haaretz. So you'll be, why? Know that you'll be crossing the Jordan. In other words, while they were odam biyadein, as they're crossing, okay, Joshua gave them a pep talk. Okay, what did he tell them? This is what you need to know. Okay, while they were crossing, De'u alma atem ovrim. Understand, know why you are crossing the Jordan, ovrim teyadin, al manat torishu et yoshvei haaretz, in order that you know that you will take over the land of Eretz, of this land. You'll do so by driving out the other populations there. Mipnechem shenei amar, as it says in the pasuk in Bamidbar, Vorashtem et kol yoshvei haaretz mipnechem, and you will drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. Now, okay, so here's the rest. Now, Yehoshua does not give a long, detailed speech in the text of Yehoshua there. Okay, however, the Gemara goes on and adds details to that speech. So that's what we're continuing with now.
This is still Yehoshua speaking.
Okay, all right, so what happens? Ima temosim kain mutav. If you do that, fine, great. V'im lav, if not, ba'im mayim v'shotfin etchem. And if not, the waters will come and overcome you, drown you. Mai otichem, what the language that Yehoshua used, and he used instead of etchem, otichem. What is the difference, says the Lashon? Says the Gemara, oti ve'etchem. Mai otichem, oti, it will drown me and you. Okay, going on now, continuing Joshua's remarks according to the Gemara. Odam b'Yarden, while they were still in the Jordan, amar lehem Yoshua. He so said as follows: Harimu lechem ish even echat al shichmo, that raise for yourself, lift up for yourself a man. Okay, a single stone. Lemispar shiftei Yisrael. So the implication is each tribe would have a single large stone that they were to carry. Okay, we're going to see why in a moment. Uktiv, and it was written, Leman tiyeh zot ot b'kirbechem ki yish'alun b'nechem machar lemor. Okay, in order so this will be a reminder among you. Okay, and we don't use the word here souvenir per se. Okay, but it will be a clear remembrance, like a stela. Okay, a stela. Well, in a sense, in olden times, remember, they would erect stone monuments called a stela, which would, in the foreign countries, it was the Egypt and other places, to memorialize the victories of the king. Here, this was to memorialize and remind the Jewish people that when their children would ask, okay, in the future, and say, Ma ha'avanim ha'ele lechem, okay, sounds a lot like what? Pesach, right? Okay, Gomer, Siman lebanim she'avru avot et hayarden. That's a reminder to the children that they crossed the Jordan. Okay, all right. So going on now. So it would appear that this is the first time they're told to get these rocks, okay, for a particular purpose. Okay, so what's going to we're going to see in a second. We'll come back to that in a moment. Odam biyarden, again, Amar lehem Yoshua, again, while they were still continuing, still crossing, okay, Yoshua tells them another point. Se'u lachem mizeh mitoch hayarden, take from there, from the riverbed, the bottom of the river, right, of Jordan, mimatzav raglei hakohanim, from the area where the Kohanim were standing. All right. Achen shtei avanim. Take 12 stones. Okay. So now this is a second set of stones. Okay. Everybody with me? No, it's a second set. Okay. Because one set is supposed to go in the river. Okay. By the river. And a second set is what they're going to bring. All right. Okay. Ve'avartem otam imachem, and bring them with you. V'hinachtem otam b'malon asher talinu bo halayla, and you will carry them, and you will bring them to the place where you are going to camp that night. Okay, so we have two sets of stones. One set of stones from the riverbed that are going to be put either in the river itself or at the bank of the river to remind future generations where they crossed, and a second set of stones that are going to be carried to them to wherever they're going to camp that night. Okay, and we're going to see what the purpose of that second set of stones will be shortly. Okay, so let's go on now. Yechol bechol malon umalon. We might have thought, okay, that those would need those stones to be put in every place that they would stay over. Okay? Talmud Lomar, but however, the text tells us, Asher Talinu Bo Ha Laila, the stones, that place where you will camp that particular night. Okay? Okay, let's go on. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, Abba Chalaftan, the Rabbi Eliezer ben Matya, v'Chananya ben Chachinai, amdu al otan ha'avanim v'shiarum. Okay, there were three sages that actually were standing by these stones, and they measured them. Okay, kol echad ve'echad. Okay, each one of them, shakula ka'arba'im se'ah. They measured 40 se'ah. Okay. Right now, an art scroll goes through a whole note there as what it's figuring out what it was. Okay.
They do say at least several hundred pounds.
Right. Right. Okay. Ugamire, and we learn as follows: the tauna, that the burden that was carried, right? The medale inche lekatfe tilta de taune have. Okay, and we learned that they carried it on their shoulders. Okay, right? Was basically,
You can carry it
okay.
3 times as much as you can lift.
Okay.
is basically what it's
Basically, certain, right. In other words, you may have needed somebody to help you lift it up onto your shoulder, but you could still carry 3 times that weight. Mikana tamechashev. Okay, from here we can even determine another example of whether when they carried items. Now, we need to know, okay, and with all due respect to Art Scroll, its drawing was inadequate. Okay, all right. Okay, I felt that the drawing in Koren was much better personally. Okay, in any case, I'm going to give a sense of what it was. All right. So what happens? Mikana tamechashev. Here you're able to consider, estimate, determine le'eshkol, when the spies were bringing the produce of the land. Okay, and they brought, in particular, we're told, a large cluster of grapes. How large was it? Okay, Shene Amar. It says it there in the pasuk. Vayisu b'mot bishnayim, and they carried it using a pole with 2. Okay, with 2. So the Gemara wants to ask, does that mean that you had a single pole with one person at each end, and the eshkol, the grape cluster, was sitting on top of the pole? Or are we going to see a different presentation? Okay, that's why I'm spelling it out. Mimashma, because we have a machloket meforshim here. Mimashma, we understand, shene amar bamot. but the fact says they used a pole. Eini yodea b'shnayim. Why then does it have to tell me two? Okay,
No, there's a guy in each man.
you'd automatically think if they carried a pole, right? All right, and something was on it, okay, they needed two guys to do it. Okay, right? Logic would tell you. Ma Talmud Loma. Okay, so what is it trying to tell us? Bishnayim, when it says two, Bishnei Motot. In other words, they were using two poles. Okay, so what do we mean? Okay, we're talking about a situation where they had two sets of poles. Okay, almost like a scale. Okay, in other words, it's as if you had, okay, I'm going to give an example, everybody. So I'm sitting opposite right now, Reuven, okay? And Heshi is opposite, okay, Shmuel, all right? So if Reuven and I have a pole, and Shmuel and Heshi have a pole, and then across those poles, I have additional poles, okay? So I have poles the lengthwise, and I have poles widthwise, and then the item I'm carrying is on top in the middle. So in essence, you really have, okay, like a rack, thank you, okay? And what you actually have is four people carrying the item.
Or maybe 6 or 8.
Or could be more, okay? Depending on what you're carrying, number of items, right? All right, depending on what number of items that are being carried, okay? So that's the image I wanted us to comprehend. Instead of just two people on a pole, it's yes, two on a pole, but additional,
2 more poles with 4 more guys.
okay? All right, so what happens?
That are going diagonal. I'm facing a vertical. Now you're telling me I had two poles which were diagonal. Well,
That's a machlokas.
That's the machlokas.
I understand that.
And why do you
Because
ask?
don't say who will tell me if it's not anchored properly, it's gonna move.
Right. Okay, you're right. That's why I suggested that it was not diagonal, okay, but across. That's the machloket between Rashi and Rabbi Hanan. Okay, but we're not going to go into that in detail. Okay, so what happens? Okay, so says Rabbi Yitzchak, say, Turtani. That's what he means by sets of scales, in a sense, or sets of poles, right? The Turtani. Okay, you have poles on top of poles on top of other poles. HaKetzad, how did they do it? Shmona nasu eshkol echad. It took 8 of them to carry a single cluster of grapes, right? Nasa rimon, or to carry a pomegranate around. Ve'echad nasa te'ena, one carried a fig, all right? Yehoshua ve'Kalev lo nasu klum. And Joshua and Caleb, excuse me, did not carry any items. See, by it, Emma. And if you want to say, by asking logically, how come Caleb and Yefuna, Caleb and Yehoshua didn't carry anything, right? Mishum de chashive, maybe because they were so important. V'ibayat Emor, if you want to say, shelo hayu ba'ota etza. Okay, in other words, to indicate that, okay, that they weren't part of the plan of the other Meraglim to give a negative report on the land. Okay? Well, okay. Now, Plige ba Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Yitzchak nafka. And there was an argument here between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak nafka. Chad amar l'divrei Rabbi Yehuda. One said it was like the view of Rabbi Yehuda, okay, who we said, who said it was a curtain, a pillar, 3 mil high. That was Rabbi Yehuda's view, and we go over the top. Okay, I'm trying to move fairly quickly. All right. Kechaniatan avru, that they crossed in their formation. Notice that was the item. The divrei Rabbi Eliezer, okay. The the divrei Rabbi Eliezer bar Rabbi Shimon, but he said they went in a row. Okay, v'chad amar, and the other said ben mar uvein mar kechaniatan avu. Either both of them really said, with this one or that one, that they crossed in formation, but mar savar adam kal umar savar mayim kali. But one felt that people move faster, and the other felt that the water moves faster. Okay, now we go on with the following discussion. Shlach lecha anashim. Okay, now remember, regarding this issue of sending spies, Moshe, okay, it was a demand of the nation. It wasn't a command that Hashem said to Moshe. So now we're going to go into that scenario at this point. Okay, so it says Shlach lecha anashim, where the pasuk cites that. Amar Reish Lakish. Okay, says Reish Lakish interpreting the phrase Shlach lecha mida'atcha, that Hashem responded to Moshe. Okay, you can send them based on your own view, your own opinion. Okay, v'chi adam zeh borer chalek ra la'atzmo, and you think a person is going to choose the inappropriate, just make inappropriate decisions for himself. Chas v'shalom, especially Moshe Rabbeinu. V'hainu dichtiv, that's why it's written then, v'yitav be'enei hadavar, that it says it was good in his eyes. Amar Reish Lakish, again, be'enei v'lo be'enav shel makom. It was good in Moshe's eyes, but that doesn't mean Hashem was happy with the decision. Okay? Artsco has an interesting note there too. I did not write down which was, but okay, just a note. Okay, so what happens? We again cite the pasuk. Still continuing with this episode. Okay, v'yichparu lanu et haaretz. Okay, and they scoured the land. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, he says as follows: Miraglim, okay, lo nitkavnu ela lebushta shel Eretz Yisrael. The intent of the spies was to bring embarrassment, shame, okay, on the land of Israel.
Even on their going up.
Okay, Ktiv. Why? Hacha, because it's written here, Vayichparu lanu et haaretz. Okay, that we let us go and we will examine the land. Uktiv hatam, but it's written also there later, right? V'chafra halevana ubusha hachama v'gomer. Okay, that the moon coming out brought embarrassment to the sun. Okay, the implication is the question of light.
Later on, there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu,
right,
that the sun and the moon were embarrassed that people worshiped them.
Okay, I had a different shot there. Yes, Bob.
Oscar makes a comment that I can't ignore. It said that Hashem allowed the Meraglim to carry on their activities, but he did not command it. What is the difference between allowing it to happen and commanding it? They did it on their own.
Aren't you a parent?
Okay.
Yeah, from Hashem's perspective, everything is.
He knows.
But we have Bechira Chachos.
Okay, my answer to you is basically Hashem gives us free choice. Okay,
And we can mess
and
up.
and I'll give you a quick example. Okay, all right. Well, the example I was going to give is, you see, as a parent, you see a child coming close to a hot stove. It's your decision as a parent. Do you tell the child not to touch the stove?
In which case he will.
Okay, all right. Or do you not tell the child not to touch the stove, knowing that the child might touch it and suffer the consequences, but as a result, learn an important lesson? Okay, so I'm using that example as to say the same way Hashem is ideally a good parent, okay? And knows there are times when you must intercede, and there are times when perhaps Hashem decides he has to hold back, okay? And people have to learn the lesson on their own in order for humanity, which he created, to grow spiritually or intellectually or morally.
Even though he knows
Okay,
what the
very good
results are
example.
going to be.
Okay, that's the best answer, the answer I can only give. Okay. Okay, so we're now going on. All right. So what happens? All right. So we got to the all right. So Vigomer. So we're now about 1/3 down the Amud. Right. Ve'ele shmotam. So now we're citing another pasuk, and with this pasuk we're getting an interesting perspective. The Gemara wants us to understand that apparently if we've said that the intent of the majority of the Meraglim was negative, to bring embarrassment and shame on the land of Israel, even though Hashem was giving them the land and wanted them to realize they should have trusted in him, okay, in that case. But they demanded on their own to go ahead and scout out the land. Okay, it's possible, the Gemara is suggesting, that from the names of some of the Meraglim themselves, we can gather that this was their negative intent. Okay, that's what the Gemara suggests. And that's where we pick up here. Ve'elu shmotam, and these are their names, Lamata, okay, going forward. Ruvain, okay, from the tribe of Ruvain, Shamua ben Zachur. Okay, one example, right? Okay, Amar Rebbe Yitzchak. So Rebbe Yitzchak is darshaning in this context of what we were saying. Davar ze masoret biyadenu. We have this tradition, okay, me avotenu, okay, right, from our ancestors, okay, right. Now that's a very short piece, okay, but I want us to understand clearly, all right, first of all, Ha'omer davar b'shem amro was very important, okay, to say it in the name of the one who said it. And number two, this is a clear example, okay, of what we've talked about, okay, that there was this Masorah in Batei Midrash, okay, that they would teach the Masorah Ba'al Peh and hand it down, okay. So as I said, I think that this, while and here is what he's going to tell us. Miraglim al shem ma'asehem nikra'u, that these individuals who were the spies, based on their deeds, in other words, what their intent was, their name is associated with it, right? Va'anu lo alta biyadenu ela echad. And we have retained, says Rabbi Yitzchak, only one example, okay? Namely, okay, Satur ben Michael. When it says his name was Satur ben Michael, what does it mean? Satur, shesatar ma'asav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, that he hid the deeds of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, in other words, that the implication is that they weren't revealing the truth about the land. Okay, furthermore, Michael, she'asa atzmo mach, that he made himself weak. Okay, in other words, he didn't stand up to the plan. Okay, or stand up in favor of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, all right. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan. Af, says Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, he's going to give another example. Now, perhaps that's from the Beit Midrash that he attended. Okay, so he says, Rabbi Yochanan here. Af anu ne'amar. So we also have an example. Okay, ne'amar, as it says, Nachbi ben Vafsi. That was another name. Okay, Nachbi shehichbi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. that he hid the words of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, Uvafsi, the second part, Shepisa Amidotav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he actually almost like stepped on, okay, the attributes, the characteristics of the Kadosh Baruch Hu by going along and being part of this negative plan. Okay, now, new piece from the same discussion about the Mirag. Via Alu Banegev, via Vo Ad Chevron. Okay, they went up through the desert, okay, the wilderness, and they came to Chevron. Vayavo, it says Vayavo. Well, in other words, shouldn't that's what it said?
It
Should have said Vayavo instead of Vaya'alu. Why the change in Lashon? Okay, Mabayane, that's what it should have said. Amar Rava says Rava, Milamed Shapiresh Kalev Me'atzat Meraglim. It tells us that Kalev separated himself from the other spies. This is a nice piece of Agadata. Vahalach v'nishtateach al kivrei avot. And he went and prostrated himself on the graves of the ancestors. Okay? In other words, he went to where Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were buried. Okay? Amar lahen, and he said to them, Avotai, bikshu alai rachamim.
Remember, Yaakov was already buried there?
Yes,
Yeah,
sure.
sure. Marat Machpelah.
Wait a minute, what did you say? But didn't he come up with the group from?
No, Yaakov didn't come.
I mean,
They brought him
I'm
back,
sorry, Yitzchak.
right? They brought, right? Right? They brought back Yaakov's, right? Yosef brought back Yaakov's body
Right.
to Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
So he's buried there.
Okay.
Okay? So, but we're not saying Avotai here is Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. The bones of Yosef were brought by Moshe when they came. Okay? So just a distinction. Okay? All right, so what happens? So he says, and this is praying at the kever, which tells you, at least in the time of Chazal, that was already a common practice. Okay, to go to a cemetery and pray at the cemetery for the intercession of deceased, okay, to benefit the living. Okay, so it tells you how long that Masorah goes back to. All right, so what happens? That I be saved from the plan, the conspiracy, I'm going to use that word here, of the spies. Okay, what about you? That tells me Kalev. Okay, what about Yehoshua? Asks the Gemara. Kfar bikesh Moshe alav rachamim. That Moshe already requested for him God's mercy. Shneamar, as it says, Vayikra Moshe leHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. That Moshe, when he changed his name, added the divine letter associated with the divine name, the letter Yud. Okay, Ze Yoshiacha. Okay, that will save. Me'atzat miraglim. Okay, from the conspiracy of the spies. V'hainu dichti, and that's why it's written. V'avdi kalev akev haita ruach acheret imo. That's why the pasuk seems to say and refer to only Kalev and not Yehoshua in the pasuk just being cited. My servant, right, my servant, right, yeah, my servant Kalev. I'm just looking the quick. My servant Kalev, because he has another spirit within him. Okay. Okay, in other words, that his intent, his mindset was not like that of the other spies. Okay. Okay. Vesham Achiman. So when we're referring there to that location, okay, Hebron, all right, that's the case. Right? We have a pasuk that tells us Vesham Achiman Shishi V'Talmi V'Gomer, that these okay, and they were known as the children of the Anak. All right. In other words, they were giants. Remember, that's what they came back and reported. Okay, right? Right. So what happens? Right? V'shem achiman sheshai v'talmi v'gomer achiman miyuman sheba'achiv. Okay, what do we mean by achiman there? Okay, that he was miyuman, he was strong, he was like a bull, miyuman sheba'achiv, the strong sheshai shemasim et haaretz kishchatut, that when he walked, he made holes, pits in the land. Okay, right? Talme shemasim et haaretz tlamim tlamim. That when he walked, it would made like furrows in the land. Okay, davar acher. So another explanation, but again, remember these as drash. Okay, achiman bana anat. Okay, all right. So what happens? We say that Achiman, all right, he built the location of Anat. Shishai bana Alash. He also built a location. Talmai bana Talbush, and he built another location. All of these were various locations. As well, cities. All right, but what happens? Then Yelidei Ha'anak, when the pasuk said that they were the children of the giant, how did we understand that? Shema'anikin chama b'komatan. That they were so tall, that the sun appeared like a necklace around them. That's the case. Right? So now we come back to another pasuk. B'Chevron Sheva Shanim Nivnata, and Chevron was built 7 years before. We're going to get to that. What does it mean 7? In other words, it said the pasuk says 7 years before Tzoan Mitzrayim. Mai Nivnata. What do we mean when we say it was built? Ilema Nivnata Mamash. If we're going to say the city was physically built 7 years before Tzoan, which was an area in Egypt, which we're going to read about shortly. Right? So on. Efshar Adam boner bayit libno katan, kodem libno gadol. Is it possible that a man would build a house for his younger son? Because as Mal just pointed out, what they would do is either they would add on to an existing house or build a separate house for the new chassan and kala. Uvenech, right? Is that the case? Before he would build for the older child, dichtiv, as it says, uvenech Ham, Kush, umitzrayim v'gomer. And if you see the order, the sons of Ham, Kush, umitzrayim, right? That's theoretically in order. Canaan is after these 3 are mentioned. So Mitzrayim should have been built then before Canaan. And Son was in Mitzrayim compared to Chevron, which was in Canaan. So that's the parallel. Ella shahaita mivuna, but rather it was fertile. Al echa mishiv'a b'tzon. It was 7 times more fertile than Tzoan in Egypt. Ve'ein lecha trashim b'chol eretz Yisrael yeter mechevron. And we have no more rockier. I'll translate trashim there. It's more full of rocks, right? In that, and all Eretz Yisrael more than the area around Chevron. Mishum de kavre ba shichvei. Why? Because they use the land primarily for burial space. What's the implication? It's not good fertile land either for crops, for cemetery. Right?
More back to the kasha.
So what happens? Ve'ein lecha me'ula b'chol ha'aratzot yoter me'eretz Mitzrayim. But elsewhere we learn, that when the Bnei Yisrael settled in the northern part of Egypt, that was supposed to be good land, because remember, they were shepherds. Okay, so you needed a certain amount of fertility in the land to grow grass for the
Crazy.
grazing. Okay, so what happens? Right? Shnei why? Because it says elsewhere in a pasuk, Kigan Hashem ke'eretz Mitzrayim, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Ve'ein lecha me'uleh b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and you had nothing better, more preferred. Okay, however translated in Egypt, yater mitzoan, than this area of Tzoan. Okay, dichtiv. Why? Because again, we have a pasuk that tells us, Ki hayu b'tzoan sharyo. Right? That again, Tzarav, his rulers, his princes. So implying, okay, that was the location where the seat of the kingdom was located. Okay, if the city rulers had to go visit the Pharaoh, where was the Pharaoh located? The best location. Okay. Va'afilu hachi, and even then, says the Gemara, okay, Chevron mevuneh, that Chevron was still fairly fertile. Achad mishiva b'tzoan, 7 times more fertile than Tzoan. But the Gemara says, v'Chevron trashin have, but Chevron was full of rocks. How can you say it was fertile? Okay, because when we think of fertile, what are we thinking of? Planting, normally, right? Vahaktiv, but isn't it written? Vahi miketz arba'im shana. It was after 40 years. Vayomer Avshalom el Hamelech, and Avshalom says to the king, Elchana v'gomer, that I will go, and finishing it, to Hebron. Why? To fulfill my vow. So why was he going there? If okay, what was the important reason? Va'amar Rav Avira, says Rav Avira, v'itema Rav bar Chanan. Others say it was Rav bar Chanan. Shahalach lahavi kivasim michevron. In other words, the implication was, fine, it wasn't good land enough for planting, but it was certainly very fertile land and adequate to grow grass and scrub grass, which was needed for cattle raising, sheep, etc., etc. By the way, there's a difference between to what degree sheep eat grass versus cattle.
Every grass up.
What? Sheep nibble grass all the way down to the ground level. Okay, whereas cattle don't do that. Okay.
That's why the cattlemen and the sheepmen don't get along with each other.
That's the old way. If you watched enough westerns,
That's right.
right, you learned that. Okay. Vitanya. And we learned elsewhere in a Braita, Elim mimoav, kivasim mechevron. That Braita tells us, right, that they used to bring the best rams from Moab and the best lambs from Hebron. Okay, that was the case. Right, so what happens? Mina, Aide de Kalisha Ara. Okay, so it tells us that the earth was thin, we might say, okay, but it was still good for grazing, right? Avda Raya, it was good for grazing. Vishaman Kanyana, and that grazing land was good enough to fatten the livestock. And we're going to stop right there, okay? And then we'll pick up tomorrow on from that pasuk, because tomorrow is a long, as you can tell, it's more Adgadata. All right, everybody? Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes, Ron.
what month of the year was it when they crossed?
In Jordan? You know, that's a good question. I really can't recollect.
But you know, I'm asking you that if it's December, by Jordan, how do you get such a huge amount of water? There is no water.
Right.
What was your question?
Depending on the time of the year.
It says they cross.